Sports Beat Live post-game edition from Arrowhead Stadium. Sports Beat is brought to you by the University of Kansas Health System. I am joined by my colleagues on a grim day. I'm joined first. We'll get into all that in a second here, but I'm joined by my colleague, Sam McDowell. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Go on, Herbie.
Hey, same old, same old. Also joining us, Jesse Jewell, who covers the University of Kansas, but he's joining us for all our Chiefs coverage. Jesse, how are you, my friend? Hey, doing well, thanks. And lastly, but not least, Lila. Lila covers the University of Missouri, but she's also helping out with our Chiefs coverage. Lila, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. How are you doing, Herbie?
Hey, we're rocking and rolling. Vahe Gregorian, our columnist, will join us late, but we are going to start off with this. Hey, I think Patrick Mahomes said it best. When you're up 21-3 in a game, you can't lose it. And he put it on himself. Mahomes said that in his post-game presser. And, of course, I am talking about the Chiefs' 27-24 loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, an upset win in the minds of a lot of people in the AFC Championship game at Arrowhead Stadium. Sam, as we get ready to break this down, I know you wrote a piece on arguably one of the worst playoff defeats for the Chiefs. Go ahead and take a dive into that. Why do you think that was the worst loss, and how did we get to this point here?
Well, I mean, most simply, this team has Patrick Mahomes. You know, this stadium has experienced plenty of games like this. They've lost bigger leads than this. They have lost games in which they were larger favorites than the 7-point favorite they were today. But the combination of those two, and then those teams did not have Patrick Mahomes. There was no Patrick Mahomes in the Lynn Elliott game, and the no punt game, and the only field goal game, and the Marcus Mariota pass to himself game. And, you know, when you're up 21-3, you have a 97% chance to win. Jesse found that stat from Next Gen Stats. And you have the best player in the world standing on your sideline. I think the totality of that package makes it the worst loss that this team has experienced. And that what really hits me is that this team had fooled, as I phrased it, their fans to believing that this was part of their past. And here it is, you know, with Patrick Mahomes, year 4 of him starting, and it's every bit as part of their present as it was back then.
Yeah, when you look at the stats there, and Jesse is our stat guy, so to speak, because he loves diving in the stats. The Chiefs were rolling in the first half. 3 of their first 4 possessions, touchdowns. Mahomes came out of there with 220 yards passing and 3 touchdowns, one to Tyreek Hill, one to Travis Kelce, and the last one to McCole Hardman. The second half was completely different. 55 yards passing total for Mahomes in that second half. What in the world happened in that second half, Jesse? What happened there? Before you get to that question, there was a play in the first quarter where the Chiefs had an opportunity before halftime to potentially go up another touchdown. First, take us through that play there, and then we'll dive into next what happened in that second half.
Well, first off, I've taken myself off the mute button, so I have gotten myself away from what every person on a Zoom call has done so far. So that's the first step for me. But yeah, no, I wrote about that. The play at the end of the first half. 5 seconds left. Tracy Wolfson from CBS does a great job. She says on the broadcast that Patrick Mahomes, basically with no timeouts left on the 1 yard line, tells Andy Reid, like, give me a chance, give me one play, I can do this, basically. And again, I kind of go back in the history. Think about last week. Andy Reid trusts Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes to go like run their own routes and do their own thing and do this audible in the middle of chaos with 13 seconds left, and it treats them well. They go and they get 25 yards to Kelce on a route that he basically made up on the fly, and they march down the field and they get that game-tying field goal and they make it to the AFC Championship game. So, if you're looking at Sam made this point. The Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, and so much of last week when you talk about like the option play and people criticizing that, it's like, why would you take the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands in that situation? Well, in this scenario, Andy Reid put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands. And so that, to me, Sam, might be kind of more big picture. Troubling is not the word, because Patrick is great and he's amazing and he's an alien and he's what has led this team to the heights it has. But yeah, the second half, when Cincinnati especially dropped 8 in the coverage, it was something that Patrick didn't really respond to that well. I mean, they had some stats online about that where, when they dropped 8+ into coverage, it was more than Patrick Mahomes had seen all year, and he really did not respond well to it. You saw he would sit in the pocket, wouldn't make a decision. They had a spy on him so he couldn't scramble, and they were really forcing him to make throws, and he was indecisive. And that might be the most shocking part of this whole thing, is that up 21-3 or whatever scenario you want to say, 97% chances to win, the Chiefs repeatedly put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands, and he didn't lead them to a win. And that to me is kind of shocking at this point in time, because we've seen him do that so many times, including last week, including the week before, all those times. So the fact that he didn't come through in those crucial moments, that's a little bit surprising, and that's what maybe is most surprising to me after this game.
All teams all season long have dared Patrick Mahomes to be patient in a different way. With the two deep shell, they're not blitzing much. And late in the season, we've tried to analyze sufficiently, I think, in the ways that the offense has changed and solved those problems. And when you ask Patrick Mahomes, why is the offense different than it was during their midseason struggles, the first thing he would always say is, I've learned to be patient. And I felt like the Bengals today said, prove it. And in the second half, they were not only dropping guys into coverage. When you watch their defensive line, they were building a little bit of a wall to where the object of the pass rush, it did not seem, was to literally rush the passer, but make sure the passer doesn't get by you. Make sure he doesn't scramble by you for large chunks. And Patrick Mahomes, I mean, we saw him sometimes he would scramble out to his right, just set up shop there and look for something, and he couldn't find anything open. And the interception, I thought, was a play of a product of impatience, because the screen pass was never there. That ball should have been thrown away. And you could argue the play in overtime was as well. I know it's third down, and those equations are different. You're more likely and apt to force a pass on third down because you're going to punt the ball anyway. But I didn't feel like that pass was necessary anyway. And let's face it. I mean, I think we all knew when the Bengals intercepted that ball, only needed a field goal, that was probably the end of the game.
The thing that surprised me the most, Sam, and you bring up a very good point, because if you remember during Mahomes' post-game media availability, I asked him that question, what were the Bengals doing? And he specifically said, hey, I was taking shots down the field when things were open underneath. When we know that he's adjusted to that, how shocking was that to hear him? And first off, kudos to him for taking credit, taking accountability for that. But how shocking was that to you when you heard him say, yeah, I was trying to force it too much down the field?
Well, I mean, it's an admission of what we all saw. And I think his personality is to take the blame, even sometimes when the blame is not on him. And I mean, let's be real. I mean, there's plenty of blame to go around in this game. The stretch is well beyond Patrick Mahomes. The first drive of the second half, which after the way the first half ended that Jesse just described, I think it magnifies the importance of that first drive coming out of the second half. You're basically trying to play make it, take it there. You've missed the make it part about it. You still get the ball back. When that amplifies the importance of to score on that drive, or at least not go 3 and out. And 2 of the drives on that sequence were dropped passes. Tyreek Hill had a ball in his hand. I understand it's in traffic, but he's got to catch the ball. Third down play, Mahomes, I thought he could have just thrown a straight ball to Travis Kelce. Instead, he tries to lob one. I think that took Kelce by surprise. It still falls right into his hands, and he drops it. And those are the issues that were plaguing the Chiefs mid-season. And so I just thought today that it was just a classic case of one drive snowballing into another. They didn't execute on one drive. Patrick Mahomes feels like he's got to do more on the next drive. And I thought that was indicative of the entire second half. So to hear him say it, I guess I'm not too surprised, because I think throughout this season, and let's face it, the last 4 years, we've seen that he's willing to acknowledge whenever he's part of the problem. And that's why I thought today he sort of said he was the problem. I thought he was part of the problem.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And we are joined now by our esteemed columnist, Vahe Gregorian. Vahe, welcome to Sports Beat Live, our post-game edition.
I was hoping you'd say esteemed. Thanks. I'm glad to be with you, finally.
You are esteemed, though. I left that out. I purposely left that out, but I didn't need to say it because you already know. But before I get to you, a question for you. Lila, what stood out to you the most about that first half and the transition to the second half?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone has touched on it a little bit, but just how ineffective the offense looked, really stood out, especially I think, and I think Jesse or someone mentioned this, especially given what we had seen last week with the Bills game and them looking unstoppable. They looked so good against the Steelers and seemed to have turned everything around. So to see, the offense be so ineffective, I think it was, 83 total yards of offense in the second half. We touched on Mahomes' stats a little bit. So to just kind of see them completely stifled, because I think, it felt to me at some point the Bengals offense was going to, get going. If you'd gotten a bit more from the Chiefs offense, I don't think that would have ended up mattering as much. They just kind of need a bit more there. And it was just really shocking to kind of see this offense look so ineffective after looking so unstoppable for so many weeks.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Lila, because this actually leads right into Vahe. Vahe, I know you wrote a column about last week. We saw the best of the Chiefs. In 13 seconds will live forever in Chiefs lore. Why was that sort of misleading coming into this game and the outcome of this game, given this epic collapse, so to speak?
Well, look, there's a lot of parts to that, but I do think you can make the case. It's a reasonable case that one way or another, the Chiefs peaked a week early, and I don't know whether we can say they didn't emotionally recover, but somewhere in there is a combination of things rolled together that when they were in command, they did not have it in them to break this game open. And again, was that strategy? Was it some level of emotion? I don't know. But I think one of the apt things that came up last week, and it was kind of funny, I didn't think about it in the context of Al Michaels calling the game last week at the time, but it did conjure some of the great calls in sports history, the way that game went. And even the "Do you believe in miracles" line from the 1980 USA-USSR hockey game. But the difference is, we were talking about this among ourselves, I think, that game, the context of that game in sports history is forever different because the U.S. went on to beat Finland in the gold medal game. And that's a little bit of what this is today. It's not on the same tier, really, but it's just as a point of reference. The context of that game last week now changes with the Chiefs not winning today. It's not part of the DNA of a great postseason run. It's a standalone marvel, which is great, but it's different than what it might have been. One quick other thing I just want to point out, because I'm worried I'll forget about it. The whole thing here is that the Chiefs didn't put it away. What's a funny little parallel, it's probably just kind of a quirky coincidence to the Cincinnati game in Cincinnati, but we all remember that Byron Pringle's touchdown kickoff return got called back late in the first half of that game. That would have given the Chiefs an 18-point lead. If they'd done something with that at the end of the half, maybe even the field goal was enough. It's still a different game in the second half. And the touchdown, though, would have been the knockout punch. I really believe that in the parallel universe where the Chiefs scored a touchdown on that drive, it's over. Yeah. So it just seemed like they got caught in no man's land on that, and then they just got gunked up altogether in the second half offensively.
Let's play a little what-if scenario here. If Andy Reid had the opportunity to do it again, or let's say one of us has the headset on, Sam, do you kick a field goal there at the end of the first half?
No, I go for the touchdown. I think sometimes the right decision doesn't work out. Now, the Chiefs tried to play both sides of the fence there. Their intention was not to go for the touchdown instead of go for the field goal. Their intention was, hey, the last play took 4 seconds. If this play only takes 4 seconds, you still have time to kick the field goal. The problem was the play that they ran. And I actually don't even know if it's the play that they ran. We'll have Jesse chime in here because I know he's looked at that play, or whether it's the option that Patrick Mahomes took on that play. Reid wanted to blame his own play call. Patrick Mahomes wanted to say, hey, you can't throw it. And he's right about this. You can't throw that ball in the flat shy of the end zone. It's got to be a quick pass to the end zone, and that's it. And then you make the decision, are you going to kick the field goal or are you going to go for it? But even with 1 second on the clock, I think it's the right decision to go for it. It's the same reason I constantly say you should go for it on 4th down. I thought right there, if they score a touchdown, the game is over. They're up 18 points. They get the ball to open the second half. And, it turns into a big turning point the reverse way. But like I said, I think it's easy to criticize that decision when it doesn't work out. And before the play, I was saying they should go for it. And I still think sometimes the right decision is has the wrong result.
Very well said, Jesse. And Sam mentioned it. You probably did take a good look at it. What were some of Mahomes' options on that play? And he's right. Andy Reid did mention after the game, I might have given them the wrong play call. But what did you see there?
Yeah, so I think it's important to put in context. The previous play with 9 seconds, the Chiefs actually had a pretty good play call where Mahomes was sprinting out of the pocket. They ran a rub route for Tyreek Hill on the 1 yard line to try to get in the end zone. It's hard to tell on replay. It looked like Hill might have been open. Cincinnati did a good job. They switched off their defensive backs. So they switched the receivers in midstream and were able to execute that. Tony Romo brought that up on the broadcast. But I still thought there might have been an opening. The other thing, though, Mahomes quickly threw it away, which got them the 4 seconds, gave them another opportunity. The second call, I try to study football. I'm looking back, it's hard to exactly tell. The Chiefs run so many RPOs. I don't think it was an RPO, but what ended up happening was there was at least play action, which obviously we all know they're not going to hand the ball off on the 1 yard line. If they get stuffed, then the half is over with. But that took kind of a second off the clock. And then they had Marcus Robinson and Travis Kelce both kind of coming toward the middle of the end zone. And there was just a lot of traffic there. There were middle linebackers, a lot going on. I think I agree with Sam. If Reid and Mahomes had it to do over again, I think they'd do the same thing. I think they'd go for the touchdown. I think Patrick Mahomes, he said in the postgame, he said, I got greedy. And I think, as Sam said, that greediness led to greediness in the second half because he felt like he was trying to get back what he lost at the end of the first half. And so I think if everything could go back over again, Mahomes takes one look, sees the whole play's mucked up, and he chucks it through the end zone. And there's 2 seconds left on the clock. Or he spikes it at their feet, that sort of thing. And I think that they kick the field goal, they're still up, they have the momentum, and they go into the second half of the football. That's what I think. Is that, Sam, is that what you're thinking?
I wondered if when Andy Reid said he called the wrong play, because we all know that Andy Reid is going to take the blame regardless.
Yes.
But I think when he said he called the wrong play, I still wonder if he means I should have called a one read play, meaning you've got to throw it here, and if it's not open, you got to get rid of it. An intentional grounding is not, first of all, it's never called. We saw again today. But I just think we throw it out of the back of the end zone in particular, you're not going to get called for that. You have the opportunity at the goal line to throw over a receiver's head, and it's less noticeable because you can throw it out of the end zone when you do it. So I think it's got to be one read, he's there, or it's not. Get rid of the football. And that is going to take 4 seconds.
And I do want to say this. Again, sometimes we don't know what we don't know here.
For sure.
Andy Reid called a really good play at 9 seconds. That got them the 4 seconds extra and potentially got Tyreek Hill open on a sideline route and allowed Patrick to throw it away. So it's like you're going a little bit further down the play sheet. And again, the fact that there was play action with this pass, which everybody in the stadium knows they're not going to run the football. Again, it might just be a step down on the play call list when your perfect call was at 9 seconds. Your second best call was at 5 seconds or something you're trying to fit in there. And again, it's a chaos situation. You got 40 seconds. Patrick's asking you to run the play. You probably think you're going to kick the field goal. Then you hear your superstar quarterback tell you, I want to do this. Who's to say no to the guy? Like, Patrick Mahomes brought them here. We can beat around the bush all we want to, but how are you going to say no to Patrick Mahomes there? He is the one that has brought you to this place. You put the ball in his hands, and it didn't work out today for the Chiefs, and obviously things kind of spiraled out of control after that, but I just don't think you can second-guess that because Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes got here by having super faith and trust in each other, and that's how they're going to be successful moving forward, too.
Lila, you were nodding your head a lot there. Go ahead, chime in. What are your thoughts here?
I just thought you guys brought up a really good point about kind of how, possibly the kind of greed there is kind of what carried over of kind of getting not being able to get that play, because I think that was definitely something we noticed. I think, something that, stood out to me a lot in the second half as well is they'd had a lot of really great success with short passes in recent games. And I feel like we weren't seeing as much of that in the second half as well. Like we kind of mentioned of the lack of patience and going for deep shots, just trying to look around on a lot of those plays and, either ending up in sacks or throwing the ball away. So I think that was a really good point. And, his patience was part of why they were clicking so well. And I think he really did notice that. I know we brought that up before, but that was just kind of why I was nodding my head. I think that was really a factor that I was missing in the second half.
Vahe, same question to you, my friend. Everyone has articulated why they would go for a touchdown, but, what would you do there if you're the coach? You take the points or you also go for the jugular?
Yeah, let's ask our most conservative guy on here what he would have done.
I'm good with going for the touchdown, and it's just these guys really. Everybody has articulated it really well. They get stranded sort of in between in some ways. The thing I wanted to just shift focus to this, and you guys may have talked about it earlier. I'm sorry if you have, but the sequence that I think is really haunting is the end of regulation.
Yeah,
I mean. When they got first and goal at the 5, they had everything they wanted. In fact, our thoughts in the press box were, well, the Bengals have to just throw them into the end zone and let them score.
Yeah, go ahead and when are the Bengals going to call freeway? That's right.
So the Bengals used their last timeout after McKinnon's 1-yard run to the 4-yard line. It's second and goal at the 4. The Chiefs have their timeouts. They're in great shape. And instead, they get the 1 sack, but then the second sack was really troubling, I thought, because Patrick just waited way too long. Now, I don't, at that point, they're at the 9. They're not going for it, right, even if he throws an incompletion. But that was really odd to me. It was a very odd management of the situation. And I think it's really indicative of what was going wrong with them in the second half. They were just – I don't know if anybody has gotten a chance to really understand what the Bengals did differently. It wasn't just the Chiefs screwing up, but I don't really have a feel for how the Bengals, changed everything. I just know that they had 34 yards in their first 5 drives in the second half, and even when they finally got the yardage they needed on that last drive, they couldn't put the biscuit in the basket.
Yeah, and you're right. And a lot of offensive issues, but I also think there were probably some issues on defense as well. Before we get on to the defensive side, we're going to take a quick break here with a quick ad from our sponsor, the University of Kansas Health System.
March 4th, 2015, I got out of the shower and felt a lump in my left breast.
We were able to quickly uncover that she had 2 subtypes of breast cancer, each of them requiring separate and unique treatment plans. This is why you come to the University of Kansas Cancer Center.
It is critical to be treated by a team of experts in that specific cancer type. If you don't start with us, I think you'll have more questions than answers.
Why would you go anywhere else?
Thank you to our sponsors, the University of Health System, the University of Kansas Health System. All right, so we spent a good portion of the first half of the show talking about the offense.
Herbie, I wanted to add on to what Vahe said about the end of regulation, because I think that's an important point. The broader scope of what the Chiefs did in the second half today. We tried to spend time figuring out what the Bengals were doing differently, and I watched a lot of the Bengals stuff. They swear they didn't really change much. The Chiefs changed a lot offensively, and namely, they went away from the run. The way that the Bengals were defending the Chiefs, they were daring the Chiefs to run the football. And on the first couple drives, the Chiefs said, we'll take it. And then when you look at the overtime and second half stats combined, the Chiefs still ran 12 carries, 67 yards, 5.6 yards per carry. In overtime and in the second half combined passing, they threw the ball 18 times for 55 yards and 2 interceptions. One portion of their game was considerably more effective than the other, and they kept using the other. And so that's all related to the end of the game there. First and goal from the 5-yard line, especially when you want the clock rolling. I'm thinking at that point, run the ball 3 times. I understand if you get backed up to 4 or 5, whatever, but go with what's working. And the run with what's working. I actually thought Andy Reid acknowledged a little bit of that after the game.
Yeah, but there are also some issues on defense, and I'll say this, okay? Joe Burrow and that Cincinnati offensive line last week against the Tennessee Titans, 9 sacks, 13 quarterback hits. This seemed like a nice little matchup for Chris Jones, Melvin Ingram, Frank Clark, and company. In the bottom stat line here, the Kansas City Chiefs had 1 sack and 4 quarterback hits, and meanwhile, that allows the Bengals and Joe Burrow to come roaring back down 21-3, and next thing you know, they have a 24-21 lead. Vahe, because we talked about this on Thursday's show, how surprised were you to see the lack of a pass rush from the Chiefs' defensive front?
Well, I thought they'd get to him more, and I think all of us can, without looking back even at the play-by-play, we can think of probably 3 or 4 times off the tops of our heads where he eluded guys that really had him, if not in the grasp, but at least a beat on him. And I think credit to him for his anticipation, awareness, mobility. He really was smart and elusive when he needed to be. 2 more of those sacks changed the game. I mean, it would, again, it's funny. All these things, we say this all the time, but it's games sometimes are won and lost in dramatic ways, but a lot of times it's in the paper cuts along the way. And that's a couple of the paper cuts. They had 4 sacks on them last game and couldn't generate the same pressure. And I thought they would be better. I thought they would have learned more about how to deal with him than they did, maybe. I mean, obviously, Jamar Chase didn't have the same kind of game. But I don't think overall they were as effective as you might have hoped they'd be.
Yeah, and Kyle brings up a good point. The defense was exhausted in that second half because of the offense sputtering so much. So when the offense is 3 and out and punting away, then obviously the defense had to come out on the field a lot. You mentioned Jamar Chase. Lila, at the beginning of the game, I know you were talking about you wanted to watch who was covering Jamar Chase based on what he did against the Chiefs back in Week 17. What did you see? What did the Chiefs do different this time around to effectively take away Jamar Chase?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're mentioning, what I had mentioned, what really stood out, I don't know if it was the first drive or second drive, one of those 2 drives where, the Bengals were in the end zone. I think it was when they had to settle for a field goal on one of those first drives of the game. I thought they played better individual defense on him, at least in that first half. I think it was Travarius Ward on him for that one play in the end zone where he got kind of his hand on it and tipped it a little bit, and then it bobbled out of Chase's hands. And the play before that, I think it was, another one-on-one with Higgins. I think it was that there's another, stop there. So I thought they did do a better job with that. I think the point that you guys kind of mentioned of by the time you get in the second half, guys are exhausted and, you're not getting as much. But I thought, especially in the first half, they were really able to, stifle him better than they were in previous games. But even, with him ending with 54 yards today, you're still then, giving up 103 yards to T. Higgins. So it's kind of that give and take there, which they had talked about leading into the week is, you focus all your attention on him. They've still got 2 other guys who can hurt you. And I think you kind of saw a little bit of that today in the second half, especially.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Sam, to you, because, we had talked off on the side about this as well, back to the pass rush. How concerned were you as you're watching this game progress that they were not able to consistently get a good, effective pass rush on Joe Burrow?
Yeah, I mean, it was their biggest advantage, right? I mean, the Chiefs have invested their entire defensive salary outside of Tyrann Mathieu in their pass rush. I mean, that's the way this team is built to win. And by the way, it's the Bengals' weakness. So sure, I absolutely felt that was going to be a big advantage. But I do agree with, I think it was Kyle Coffey's point on there. The defense isn't the reason they lost this game. I mean, they had, when the offense sputtered in the second half, they put the defense in bad situations, back-to-back drives. The defense got a stop and then forced them to a field goal. That should have been the Chiefs' chance to say, hey, this was a scare. We could have lost this game, but our defense bailed us out on these back-to-back drives. I mean, you look at the possession sheet, the Bengals scored 2 touchdowns in 10 drives. Going into the game, especially knowing that the Chiefs were going to put up 21 in the first half, you have to win that game with the way your defense played today. The Bengals didn't run the ball particularly well today. I think they're about 4 yards a carry. Burrow didn't pass the ball that well overall. Lila mentioned Jamar Chase didn't have the same game he had last time against them. They were better at the point of the ball, at the point of the reception than they were the last time they faced the Bengals. I don't think that the defense had its best day, but I don't think any of the top 10 reasons they lost this game today were because of the defense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me just chime in with that too. You referred to the first 2 drives, Chiefs punt, defense holds them to 1 field goal. Pretty good. And that's when you need the offense to say, okay, as you said, it's been a scare. Now we'll just take back over. I mean, it's 21-13 at that point. A touchdown still is a big buffer. And what do? That's the interception, which, it's probably an understated play in this game. That interception by B.J. Hill that was telegraphed and, otherwise ill-considered, just boom, right in there. So the defense that's held, after a couple offensive fizzle-outs, now it's put with its back at the 27-yard line.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts to all go really awry at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the only two. I was just going to say real quick, they only gave up 2 touchdowns. One of them was 27 yards. One of them was just a 27-yard drive. So they didn't put their defense in great positions in the second half.
Go ahead, Lila.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Sam had mentioned earlier the defense giving the offense opportunities. Something that really stood out to me is L'Jarius Sneed gets that interception in the fourth quarter at a point where, the Bengals have, the offense for the Chiefs has done, really nothing in the half. And the Bengals are, en route to the comeback. You're at the start of the fourth quarter. And the Chiefs then get the ball back. And, it ends in a 3-and-out with Patrick Mahomes with a big sack at the end of that. And that was one sequence that really stood out to me as a missed opportunity there where, the defense, when things were really sputtering, got them a big play with that interception that felt like it could be a game-changing play, but the offense then isn't able to make up for it on the upper end and, has that big sack.
When we look back at this game, and I'm going to start with you, Vahe, because Sam wrote a good piece, after the game, was this the worst loss in playoff for the Chiefs playoff history? Was this their worst playoff loss? But as you try to capture the 2021 season and how the season started and, the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of an NFL season, and it finishes like this, where would you put this?
Well, look, it's a major disappointment in a lot of different ways. And one of them is, okay, so now the Chiefs have been to the Final Four for 4 straight years. They have 1 Super Bowl to show for it. And there's every reason to think they're going to be hanging around this level for some years to come. On the other hand, that window every year, you don't do something with it, gets a little shorter, a little smaller, a little tighter. You just don't know the flux that's ahead, the aging, all kinds of things like that. And it's not just an automatic reset every year that they'll just, push a button and they're going to be back here again. So I think that we're on the edge of asking, about squandered opportunities now. And especially with the dynamics of this game where you have the big lead. And Sam McDowell, I can't remember if you guys said you did talk about this, but he was going to, analyze where this stacks up, certainly in the considerable annals of agonizing postseason Chiefs losses. And this has its own little flavor, own little context, because I think we all thought maybe there was a little inoculation against this in the Mahomes era.
And that's a good point, because here's what I was going to say. If the Chiefs win this game and go to the 3rd straight Super Bowl, would we have been tossing around the D word? Is this Chiefs team a dynasty now? Sam, would you have considered this team a dynasty had they gone to the Super Bowl?
No, but, I thought that one of the most interesting things we heard today from a very somber set of Zoom conferences was Patrick Mahomes. When I asked him just like, what's the fresh feeling? What's going through your mind right now? He mentioned the way 2018 ended, the way 2019 ended, the way 2020 ended, and the way tonight ended. And so I just thought it was very telling that he's thinking already, we had 4 chances to win the Super Bowl and we've won 1 of them. And to Vahe's point, you don't know how often these opportunities are going to be. We all thought last year when they lost to Tampa, they'll probably have another chance this year. Here we are sitting here at Arrowhead talking about a playoff loss. They didn't get to the Super Bowl this year. I don't think we're going to all think, that it's going to be this Aaron Rodgers route where this team's going to lose constantly in the playoffs with the best player in the league. But it's one more example where they just lost with the best player in the league. And I think what's more difficult, and Jesse and I were talking about this after the game, it feels like it was Chiefs against the field. And the way that, KU's had some of those playoff losses, postseason losses that Jesse's covered, it didn't feel like to me that it was, hey, who's going to win the Super Bowl? It was, are the Chiefs going to win or is somebody else going to win? And you don't often put yourself in that position. You've got to take advantage when you do.
And
Take it away, Jesse. I see you grinning. Are you on mute?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with Sam, I was talking with Sam covering KU. This was the VCU loss. You can argue whether the VCU loss for Kansas in 2010 was the most disappointing. They've had other games where they were leading by more and didn't blow it, or did blow it, and games that were more disappointing. But when KU lost to VCU in the Elite Eight in 2010, they were about 50% to win the whole thing because there was just nobody left in the bracket. And hate to say it for Chiefs fans, but that's what this is. That's a missed opportunity. You look at 538's numbers. They were 47% to win the Super Bowl before today. But that was considering the Bengals were most likely their toughest opponent left, or them or the Rams. And the Chiefs at one point were 97% to win this game. So you add that to the 47, and you're probably looking at about 2/3 of a chance of winning a Super Bowl. So these guys have mentioned it. They're exactly right. You don't get these chances every day. When 97% is in your grasp, when 32 out of 33 is in your grasp, you can't let it slip through your fingers. And that's the disappointment of today. I mean, we can point to a million different reasons the Chiefs lost and what they couldn't hold on to, but the bottom line is they couldn't get it done when it was there for them at 21-3 and then 21-10 with the ball on the 1 yard line. And that's what's going to sting for a lot of months now.
Hey, Kyle Coffey agrees with you. He says, quote, "Dang it, Jesse. I tried to avoid that comparison, but this is KU/VCU," end quote. Lila, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Go ahead. Chime in with your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think that the point, Vahe made in his column about this window, it is only going to get tighter, I think, because, I talked about this last week, I believe, but, look at who, the Chiefs faced in these playoffs with, Joe Burrow and this young Bengals team and the Bills. With the Bills, Josh Allen started coming into his own this year. That seems like something that, he's only going to get better. With Joe Burrow, he didn't, he was injured last year. This is the first year that he's really played, that he has his first year of Jamar Chase in the league. Jamar Chase is just a rookie. That offensive line, that's probably going to be a huge priority for them over the offseason, I would imagine. You look at the Ravens, and they're completely banged up this year. That completely took them out of a race. I think the AFC only gets harder from here because you have so much, of this young talent moving forward. I think it's just the road, moving forward to get back to this spot just gets a lot tougher because you have all this young talent coming up in the AFC, because you'll have, Ravens and some other teams, back healthy.
Yeah, that's a perfect – go ahead, Sam. I thought you were getting ready to say something. Didn't mean to cut you off. Okay. That's perfect lead into what's next for the Chiefs, okay? What we know is, and Frank Clark said this, hey, I got some friends who've been sitting on their couches watching football. He's about to join them. That's it for the players. But as far as the front office and the coaching staff is concerned, they're about ready to shift attention to the draft, the combine, the business side of football with free agency. And then we got Tyrann Mathieu, who talked to us. And Sam, you and I have written a lot about him over the offseason. He's in the final year of his contract, but it was Lila who wrote about him the day after the game. Lila, what did Tyrann say?
Yeah, when he got asked about his future with Kansas City, he got, choked up a little bit and pretty emotional, just saying that, he really does want to be back here. And, from all indications that, this is really where he wants to be next year. I know ownership, Herbie, you had written an article in November about, them saying that, it's a priority to have him return. And I just thought it was very telling, the emotion he showed there and how much he, really cares about being with his franchise and this team.
Vahe, as a columnist, what would it mean if the Chiefs are not able to get something done before the start of the NFL's new calendar year, which is in March? If they can't get anything done with Mathieu at that point?
Well, look, I guess you'd never say never, but I think that is, unless somebody's ready to tell me what's different than I'm not thinking of, I can't think of any priority they have bigger than that going into the offseason. And honestly, what's a little weird, here they are, they just lost. Running out of power. They just lost in this round. I'm not exactly sure what the area of greatest emphasis is beyond Tyrann. They've got a lot of things. Obviously, they can always use more replenishing in the interior of both sides. But I like where their skill positions are in a lot of ways. I think just everything hinges on them getting Tyrann back in the fold.
And Sam, we both know this as well. Tyrann Mathieu is going to be a priority, but Hey, Orlando Brown, don't forget, he played this year. They traded for him. He's in the final year of his contract. Melvin Ingram is in the final year of his contract. The Chiefs have some decisions to make, don't they, Sam?
Yeah, I think the first two that you mentioned are priority 1 and 2. And I think they have a solution with Orlando Brown. If they don't work something out with him, I think they'll franchise tag him based on the way he played late in the season. I don't know that Tyrann Mathieu is going to give the Chiefs a discount. And, I could see that one going either way. But, when you look at the Chiefs' priority, they had defenses play the same way against them all season. Their internal questions need to be, what can we do to prevent defenses like that from being successful against us? And one of the answers is to get a number 2 wide receiver, a guy that can run the underneath stuff. Because they've got guys that can run the deep ball. Tyreek Hill said midseason he's tired of running the 10-yard outs. Find somebody who does run the 10-yard outs. So I think receiver needs to be a priority. They've got to get an edge rusher. If it's not Melvin Ingram, and I don't think it will be, they need to get somebody more reliable there. They're going to have to replace Tyrann Mathieu if they don't re-sign him. Charvarius Ward's a free agent. I think that's a big one as well. So there's a lot of questions, I think, about where they go in the offseason, but they're still going to be one of the favorites. In fact, I'd be surprised if they don't open next season as Super Bowl favorite. But we just found out that they opened this year with the Super Bowl favorite and what happened to them at the end of the season.
Yeah, and the Chiefs have plenty of time now to go ahead and dive into who's going to be replacing whom. The Senior Bowl kicks off next week. Then 2 weeks from now, you have the NFL Scouting Combine. Shortly after that, you'll have pro days, and then we're right smack in the free agency. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no such thing as an NFL offseason. That is name and name only. It is nonstop 365 a year. Look, I think if you had asked me last week, and we'll close with this, if you had asked me last week if the Bills had beaten the Chiefs, would I have been surprised? My answer would have been no, because, I actually picked the Bills to win that game. And then, quite frankly, it was a pick'em game, in my opinion. This week, there was no way in my mind I was thinking the Bengals were going to beat the Chiefs. This to me, was a completely disappointing way for the Chiefs to end this season. And I think this team panel here would all agree. Vahe, you mentioned it, that it was a disappointment. Sam's nodding his head. Jesse, what about you? Was this a disappointing way for the Chiefs to end the year?
Yeah, I'll just circle back to what I said before. I would have
never.
I just would have never envisioned. I got to be honest, guys. I am constantly amazed by Patrick Mahomes, and he is so many things in this franchise, but he also does the little things so well. He knows time, score, momentum. He knows when to take timeouts. It looks like he's played football for 50 years. You know what I mean? And those are the sorts of things that he kind of let the Chiefs down today, and that to me is surprising. I would not have expected coming into this game that they'd have a 21-3 lead, and that he would be one of their biggest problems in the second half. And again, that doesn't mean he's going to be bad moving forward. It means he's going to be awesome moving forward. But for a half, the Bengals got to him and got in his head, and that really resulted in the Chiefs' demise in a way that I would have never expected coming into this game.
Yeah. Lila, what about you? How disappointing and you just started this year, so you got to see a lot, but how disappointing was this Chiefs loss, in your opinion, in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, it felt like the Bills were kind of, the, beast that they, had to slay. That felt like, the bigger game in a way than this one, both with the ending, but even just in the lead up to it. As you guys said, that game felt like much more of a toss up. Obviously with how crazy that entire ending was, it felt like, with today, it was either going to be a blowout or, it was going to be close and they're going to be able to, squeak out a win. But I didn't really, think they were going to lose this one. And especially just having the 21-3 lead, I think is what makes it all the more disappointing, is that, you're up 18 points and you just completely, give that up and unravel.
Sam, last thought for you as you look back at this 2021 season. If you could use a couple of words to describe the 2021 season, what would it be?
Turbulent. I thought that this team would have a similar route as they had the last 2 years, and we saw them hit adversity that we didn't expect at 3-4, and but they were riding all the momentum that they needed going into the playoffs. I really thought they had figured out the type of defenses that they were facing from the Bengals today. Shocking ending. I did not anticipate they would lose to the Bengals, and particularly when they're up 21-3. But it all goes back to what I wrote about and what I said at the top. I thought this franchise was past losses like this because they had Patrick Mahomes, and here we are talking about one of them.
Yeah, and here's something of note for the Bengals. The Bengals in Week 17 ended the Chiefs' 8-game win streak in the regular season. The Bengals in the playoffs end the Chiefs' desire to get to a third straight Super Bowl. So when you look at streak snappers, it's the Cincinnati Bengals against the Chiefs. That's a wrap for tonight's show. I will say this. Look, the show isn't the same throughout the 2021 season. Blair, I hope you're watching and continue on with your recovery. We miss you deeply. But for us on the show, Sam McDowell, Vahe, whose power, wink, 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 ran out, Jesse Jewell, Lila Bromberg, our producer, Monty Davis in the back. I am Herbie Teope, and you have been watching Sports Beat Live, brought to you by the University of Kansas Health System. Good night from Arrowhead Stadium.